Welcome, world. This is Manage Your Damn Money with myself, Ben, and my co-host, Mr. Malcolm Etheridge. Malcolm, what's going on, man?
Not too much, man. It's one of those rainy, hot, nasty kind of.
Were you sweating through all your clothes?
Yeah, and then the rain is coming through the other side, and I guess you got to burn the clothes after that.
Absolutely. So of course you're here on Manage Your Damn Money, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money. As we always do, just a little bit of what's going on. Big week for us. I had a chance to go to the Motley Fool, which is a well-known personal finance website. Visited some folks there. We got a huge shout out from the Motley Fool Money podcast crew. Chris Hill in particular gave us a shout out, which sent our podcast downloads through the roof.
Yeah, so shout out to Chris.
Shout out to Chris, really hooking us up. So we're really thankful for that. Also, I'll be contributing to Blavity.com, a couple of pieces on money. So look out for those. We'll be posting them on our social media sites as we normally do. But real quick, big news that happened this past week. It dropped on Friday, I think. Amazon bought Whole Foods.
They're scheduled to buy Whole Foods.
Or excuse me, scheduled to buy Whole Foods. That was kind of like a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
I mean, it's still got to get through regulation, and the government
Right.
has got to give their stamp of approval and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. But it looks like it's likely to happen.
Go through.
I mean, that's huge for folks like you and me who spend money in Whole Foods. They're
Okay.
like their target audience.
I don't
But
go
then
to
the
Whole.
fact
I don't
that
go to Whole Foods.
You're still their target audience.
Okay.
Just based on age, demographics,
Sure.
and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But so if Amazon is able to bring even close to the same pricing power that they have everything else to the world of groceries,
Right.
and oh, by the way, organic groceries that everybody cares so much about, locally sourced and whatever the rest of those terms mean,
Right.
Sustainable, and I don't
Sustainability.
even know what half that stuff means. It just it sounds good.
sounds
but
great.
if they're able to make that the same price as us going to a regular grocery store, then my goodness,
Right.
So it could be a huge deal.
When I heard about the deal, the first thing that went through my mind is like those movies from back in like the 90s or some movie from the 80s or 90s where they have that moment in the future where all your needs are serviced by this one particular all-seeing entity.
Government. Yeah.
So usually it's perceived as the government. I saw it as Amazon. Amazon is this like all touching everything thing that sells you your car. It sells you your groceries. It provides you with like dental work when you need it.
I'm sure Jeff Bezos would like you to be right. 'Cause so many people doubted him 20 years ago, and
Right.
now everybody's like begging him to let them in. So
Right.
I'm sure he would love for you to be right on that one.
It was like the scene from Minority Report, the movie, where it's giving people ads based on seeing like the eyes, and it's like,
That's
John,
my biggest fear.
John, don't you need this new cream for your face? So anyway,
And I remember when I was in college and the iPod Touch came out.
Okay.
I think that's what the next iteration of it was. And like my biggest fear at the time was the iPod is somehow going to be able to sync up to my brain. And if I just think like Tupac, for example, it'll start playing All Eyes on Me. Like that was like the iPod Think would be like the scariest thing ever to me. But like now it seems like it's probably like
Not too
close
far.
enough to being a reality. So.
Right. Well, as we normally do here on Manage Your Damn Money, it is time for headlines. This week's headline is: a billionaire Damon John smashes the "quit your day job" narrative. It was a CNBC article by Kathleen Elkins, which reported on some business and entrepreneurial advice from FUBU founder and Shark Tank regular Damon John. Damon John said at the iconic conference in New York on June 7th that quitting your day job in exchange for the pursuit of your business is quote unquote garbage advice. Which is a pretty strong word to say something is garbage. Like, not only is it bad, it's garbage. When somebody says you're garbage, like on the basketball court, that means like you're worse than bad.
Right, you have no business ever touching that court again.
Just go off and go home. Get off the basketball court. So Damon John's FUBU business became a $6 million business. People remember FUBU, for us, by us, from back in the 90s, along with people wearing their jerseys backwards. So this was the quote that he said: "I was working at Red Lobster for 5 years as a waiter as I was running this business," said Damon. "It was 40 hours at Red Lobster and 6 hours at FUBU. Then it was 30 hours at Red Lobster and 20 hours at FUBU because money started to come in." He said, "Let's say I was making an average of $40,000 a year. After 5 years, that's $200,000 of salary. I would have to sell $1 million more worth of FUBU product to bring home that same $200,000. But didn't have to do that because obviously he was working at the restaurant. I just had to sacrifice time. Another like big media mogul person or big business person, Gary Vaynerchuk, always talks about, who we've talked about before on the show, always talks about using those night hours to do your business or passion or whatever it is, and making sure that you're like doing both your job and then going home and hustling through, creating whatever it is that you want to create.
Right. And then you kind of find that 50-50 and then it's 75-25 the
Right.
other way. So I'll qualify my opinion on this whole thing by saying, as you know, I'm a huge Damon John fan to begin with. And
Okay.
I remember reading in one of his books when he was telling like the Red Lobster story.
Right.
And about how like the kick in the pants to get him motivated was all the folks who he graduated high school with were then coming into Red Lobster like a year or two later to have him wait on them and their families. You know, they're in college, they're coming home from school, they're hanging out with their families, and he's their waiter. And then they're going off to actually have careers and do stuff. And when they come back home, he's their waiter again
Still.
at Red Lobster. And he's like, all right, something's got to give.
Right.
But I completely agree with the idea of figuring it out and having a stream of income in the meantime
Right.
while you're making it work.
Absolutely.
And then there comes kind of that critical moment when you've got to decide, am I going to jump off the cliff and then
Right.
make it happen?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I completely agree. I can't find fault with it at all. I'm sure that's hard for you to believe.
No. I mean, I totally agree myself. I think talking about making sure that you're maintaining your base level income is really important. I think we get sold a bill of goods on social media and other places, led to believe that people are solely entrepreneurs. But I think a lot of times it's always more helpful when you have like that baseline of income to pay the bills. And then the only thing, as Damon said, you sacrifice is time. So we just want to remind folks that you are listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money. Today's conversation at hand, really hot topic. It's two pieces to it. We're talking about insurance, so all the kinds of insurance that you can have, a really quick review. And then this one, which is getting a lot of chatter on social media. I've gotten a few text messages about it.
Yeah, that's what I've been looking at on Twitter.
Talking to your parents about their plan for going on to glory.
That's a nice way to put it.
It's a really nice way to put it. So we'll talk about how this came to be. We're going to take a real quick break, but we want to remind folks that they can find us all the time at manageyourdamnmoney.com. And you can listen to every single podcast that we've done to this point on iTunes at just search Manage Your Damn Money on the Apple podcast platform. And you can find us on social media. What's your thing, Malcolm?
At Malcolm on Money.
And I, of course, and Manage Your Damn Money, of course, is at MYDM1. We're going to take a really quick music break, hear a piece from Mr. Beats by Beeman. You can hear his music on Instagram. Just go to Beats by Beeman. And you can listen to all of his clips there. We're going to take a really quick music break. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we have entertaining conversations about money. So this week's conversation at hand, we're talking about two things. First, we're talking about all the kinds of insurances that people have, just to give people a review of what they need to be doing.
Right.
And then, as I mentioned before the break, what are we calling this? Talking to your parents about their plan for going on to glory. And going on to glory meaning when your parents or elders pass away, what's the plan? Where's the money going? that's something people only think about like at the repass.
Yeah. Well, it's not even necessarily just something you don't think about. It's something nobody wants to talk about.
Absolutely. So we'll get into that. But first, life comes at you fast. When accidents, sickness, or death hits you and your family, it's a blessing to have insurance. In this edition of NYDM with Ben and Malcolm, we are reviewing all the types of insurances, what they're for, and why you need them. Malcolm, I think we all kind of know what insurance is. It's something that you pay your premium on, and then in the case something happens to you, insurance helps to, pay for some of the expenses, if not all the expenses. What was your first experience with like insurance as an adult?
Probably having to have car insurance on a car no matter what.
Okay.
Which, I understand why the state imposes that.
Absolutely.
If you hit somebody and you don't have insurance, you basically are doing jail time at that point. So I can understand and appreciate that. But at the time, we did a show before where we were talking about like our first cars and the second cars and whatever. And me driving a Nissan 350Z at like 19, I think my insurance was like $350.
Whoa.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Real good decisions.
That's
real good life decisions right there.
Whoa. Your insurance was $300 a month?
When I drove the car off the lot, my insurance was like $348 a month.
That's crazy.
So fortunately, I was able to shop it around a lot. I didn't have a bad driving record and got it down considerably. But yeah, the first couple of months were terrible.
Right.
So anyway, that was like my first indoctrination into insurance and like
my first experience with insurance was my mother got me like this real bottom base level insurance for my first car, which was a Toyota Camry. Mm-hmm. It got totaled because I was hit by a drunk driver, and I found out that the insurance I had wasn't that great, just in terms of the way that they helped me through the whole accident process. And I was like, oh, you get what you pay for in that experience. I ended up getting all that stuff taken care of by the other guy's insurance, but it was like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm paying for a reputable and also making sure I have the package that will give me at least the bare minimum of service that I'm looking for.
Right.
So that was my first experience with insurance, was going through that and going through the claims process. And I actually had to hire a lawyer to get an appropriate payout from that accident, because they were trying to do the hardball thing where they didn't really like want to pay you what you were owed because you got hit head on by a drunk driver. Like,
I mean, the more insurance companies get to keep at the end of every year,
right,
the more they get to pay themselves.
Absolutely.
So that is kind of just standard practice, that however little we can get away with paying out, that's how much we'll.
Absolutely. So real quick, insurance defined. Insurance is a practice or arrangement by which a company or government agency provides a guarantee of compensation for a specified loss, damage, illness, or death in return for payment of a premium. So that's your monthly premium. So here's the question, like, what kind of insurances exist? Obviously, we just got to talking about car insurance. Right. Then we got homeowners insurance. Then you have renters insurance, which is a pretty basic one. Then we have some more not complicated, but less talked about ones: life insurance, supplemental insurance, and then obviously probably a show in and of itself, health insurance.
Right.
So first of all, obviously, like we talked about, car insurance protects you, your car, and others in the event of an accident. When your car is damaged, it protects you from the full cost of replacing a car or healthcare costs associated with injury, and can also provide some legal services in certain situations. Then we have homeowners and renters insurance. I think I first started getting renters insurance maybe in college.
I got renters insurance when I moved out on my own, and it was like required for the apartment that I was moving into.
Okay.
Otherwise, it probably was the furthest thing from.
Yeah, I think actually my first time I think that I can recall, I was in graduate school. I had an apartment, so I had like a little $10 fee tagged onto my car insurance for renter's insurance.
It's interesting though, because like my whole attitude towards insurance has evolved over the last couple of years.
Okay.
Because I used to see it as like an impediment, and I hate paying for it, and I hate that they make you pay for it because I'm cautious and I'm a good driver and everything else. But then like literally all of those different insurances that are mandatory, I've had a reason to use them.
Wow.
Of like my renter's insurance, my homeowner's insurance. I've had a reason to use them all, so now I see the value of paying for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Renter's insurance protects you and the value of your property in your home in case of like a fire or some other major disaster. There are different kinds of homeowners insurance. I think whenever there's like a flood, a major flood, you always hear about this, like stories crop up about this, about like the people who don't have quote unquote flood insurance.
Right.
I imagine it would be similar, like if you lived in the middle of the United States where there are a lot of tornadoes. I imagine there's like tornado insurance, and these are extra levels of coverage that you get when you live in places where there's a certain likelihood that a certain kind of natural disaster will happen.
And that kind of falls under knowing exactly what the details of your policy are.
Which is tough. It's like it's really difficult to think that someone's gonna read through every last.
But imagine if you live in a tornado zone,
You should know that.
But imagine having a tornado come through Oklahoma,
Right.
wipe your house out, and then you call up your insurance carrier and they say, "Oh, well, should have had tornado insurance." Well, where does the money come from then to rebuild that whole thing? And that really does happen to people. So
Absolutely. Interesting. I wonder if there's, because I'm from California, I don't even know if there's earthquake insurance.
earthquakes and natural disasters is probably the broad
Yeah, but specifically, I wonder if there is a such thing as the earthquake.
But then you also have to be able to get insured for it. Meaning,
Right.
if the probability of it happening is so high that the insurance company sees it as a bad bet,
Right.
you can't even get insured for it.
Well, earthquake insurance would be well, I don't know. In the event the big one actually happens, then it might not be a good bet to have earthquake insurance, because it'd be a lot of insurance that would be a lot of claims to be made. Then here's another one, Malcolm, and please feel free to kind of explain what it is. Supplemental insurance, which provides payments to you in the event of your falling sick or other major life event. You can purchase it to help you pay for services and out-of-pocket expenses that your regular insurance does not cover. So what does that mean? What is supplemental?
So it's
How do
like-
people use it?
It's long-term disability coverage, or even short-term disability coverage, where basically if you're not able to go to work and perform your regular job functions,
Right.
and you're out of paid time off,
Right.
then this insurance would step in to cover you,
Right.
and replace your income for however long it takes you to go back to work.
Okay.
So that's one that very few employers actually offer it as part of your benefits package. Some do. You
Okay.
may want to inquire about it.
Right.
But most major companies offer some level of short-term
Disability
coverage, but not long-term. You'll have to pay for it yourself.
Okay.
So, if you're a person who goes skiing, for example, you may want to consider short-term disability coverage in case something happens.
If you're not a
can't
great skier.
well, if you are a great skier,
Yeah.
great skiers go down too.
Right.
Or if you own a motorcycle or something
Right.
like that, those are things you want to consider that might keep you out of work for a few weeks or months or whatever.
So, well, actually, I'm going to ask you about millennials and all these different insurances, or especially the extra ones that we're talking about. Obviously, there's health insurance, which protects everyone from the full cost of health care for routine visits and major
Right.
health issues. It supplements or completely pays for medical-related expenses. Obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory, and with all the drama that's happened over the last several years over healthcare,
Yeah.
I think everyone kind of understands. You pay your premium, and then a portion, if not all, of your health-related expenses are taken care of. The last one, and kind of the biggest one for today's episode, life insurance.
Yeah.
And this is insurance that pays out a sum of money either upon the death of the insured person or after a set period of time after the death of that person. What do you know about health insurance, Malcolm? I mean, health insurance, life insurance.
A good bit. I'm actually licensed as an agent in life insurance.
Okay.
So I would hope that I know at least a decent amount.
Okay, so explain it. We're a show for millennials, so I think this is that gray area where you could say, well, I could take out a policy, and I have friends of mine actually who do have a policy of some kind, a life insurance policy. What's the rule of thumb with that? Do you not need it until you have kids and a full family?
Well, it's
Where's
kind of
the line?
at your own discretion kind of thing, obviously, right?
Okay.
But with that said, sort of the rule of thumb for me when my friends ask about it is, if you're married and you own a home, get life insurance.
Oh, wow, okay.
If you have a kid, get life insurance.
Right.
Those are the two things that is kind of like a non-negotiable.
Okay.
Those two are so important, and the result could be catastrophic enough that you have
Right.
to have it. And at our age, millennials, you're talking 18 to 34, 33, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to get insured because 99% of the time you're extremely healthy. You're
Absolutely.
as healthy as you're ever going to be.
Absolutely.
So if you get a life insurance policy now at, let's call it 29, like I am, this is the healthiest I'm ever going to be in my life. So,
High likelihood of that being the case.
and a lot of times life insurance policies are based on your insurability, which is based on your health at the
Right.
time. So personally, I look at it as, the reason I said those two major life events is because if you own a home
Right.
and you're married, if you were to pass away and
Right.
say you and your wife bought that house with your shared income as
Right.
the plan for how we're going to pay it,
Right.
then if you were to pass or she were to pass, then the other person gets stuck with a mortgage that they can only afford half of.
Absolutely.
And then if you have kids, kind of similar situation. I assume you want great things for your kids, like for them to go to college, for them to be able to go to good schools if you're planning on paying a private school, that kind of stuff. So having a life insurance policy in place while your kids are young, another great opportunity to make sure that you can make that happen whether you're here or not, is life insurance. And, you know, we'll get into in a second some of the differences between them, but I'm even talking specifically in those two instances about term, which is the cheapest insurance policy you can buy.
I was going to say, what's like the typical, on the cheapest level of life insurance, what's the typical like monthly on that, or the monthly payment for that, or premium?
If you're talking about somebody our age, 29, 30 years old, and you're of good health, good sound health, and you wanted to have, say, like a $500,000 death benefit is what it's called.
Meaning you would get paid $500,000.
$500,000 upon your death goes to whatever beneficiaries you designate.
Right.
That would probably run you something like $5 to $10 a month.
Oh wow, that's low.
Like,
okay.
Right. And you can, a lot of times you can get that through your employer, which is why it's so cheap.
Right.
If you bought it on your own outside of your employer, maybe you're paying double that, but that's still negligible if you consider it against.
That's a couple cups of Starbucks coffee
or some avocado toast. Those kind of things. That's essentially what you're foregoing to make sure that the things you care about most are covered. So it's extremely important, at least to consider it, and if you decide against it, have a plan for.
Okay. You know, we're getting ready to take a break, but you're listening to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Real quick, what's the difference? You kind of alluded to it. What's the difference between term life insurance and what's the other one?
Whole life.
Whole life.
Or permanent.
What's the difference between those two?
So term life insurance is literally for a term or a period of time.
Okay.
So if, for example, like I said, you buy a house, you and your wife, you buy a house with a 30-year mortgage, you get a insurance policy that stretches for the next 30 years. Okay. If you don't pass away within the next 30 years, good for you. But also that life insurance policy is done, and if you were to pass the day after, your beneficiary, your wife, wouldn't get anything from it.
Oh, wow.
But the good news is you bought it to cover the mortgage of the house, and you own the house at this point. So, you know, no love lost. Okay. But the whole life policy is meant to stick with you for your entire life. Okay. So it builds up what's called cash value in the policy. Okay. It actually lives until your very last day instead of a specific term, a specific period of time. It is more expensive because obviously the older you get, the less healthy you get, and so on, and the more likely you are to pass. So that has to be taken into account too. The cost is probably 2 to 3 times what a term policy would cost you. Okay. But regardless, have something in place for if
especially as you become more responsible for things and you're moving up in your world of work and whatnot.
Right. As more people depend on you and your income, it's important to have that plan in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that was an excellent quick review of all the different kinds of insurances that are available and people typically use. We're going to take a really quick music break and hear from another piece by Mr. Beats by Beeman, our in-house music producer. You can check his music out on Instagram at Beats by Beeman. Just spell it how it sounds. You can find him. And we are talking about, when we come back on the other side of this break, talking to your parents about their plan for going on to glory, or homegoing, or whatever you want to say, whatever nice way you want to say.
You can make it as nice as you want. I mean, yeah.
So you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money. We will be back after this. are back here on Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, having a wonderful conversation about insurance. And in this segment of the show, talking to your parents about their plan for going on to glory, which is another pleasant way to say after their passing or their death. The millennial generation is focused on moving up and finding their place in the world. But one wealth and money-related conversation that's very hard to have and rarely considered in the plan for your parents or elders have when they eventually go on to glory. Talking about death, management of homes, assets, and money is hard and may feel a little bit awkward, but talking about these topics with parents and grandparents is essential to ensuring family wealth is maintained and smart actions are taken in what will be an otherwise very difficult time. So this is an interesting life kind of helping us do what we do on this show weekly.
Right.
We didn't even know what we were going to do for the second half of this show until Saturday. No, it was Sunday. Was it Sunday or Saturday?
It all runs together.
It all runs together. Anyway, one of these 2 days, my grandmother called me, and I was with my parents-in-law, and she said, "Okay, call me back when you're home." And so I said, "Okay." She wants to talk to me about something private. Obviously, my grandmother's 87. And if we can't talk about it in front of the parents-in-law, then we probably need to, I know I need to have a private conversation. So we spoke the next day, and she said, Benjamin, I want to talk to you about something that's very important. I want to talk about the Carter Family Trust. And I said, oh my goodness, what is this? We had never had any conversation about what was supposed to happen, at least with me. I know they've had those conversations with my dad, right? But I didn't know that I was included in that conversation. So she let me know kind of the arrangement of things, who's in what order, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a very sweet, endearing conversation. She let me know some of the things that are important to her and to my grandfather. And, I just let her know that I was willing to do whatever it is that they were looking to have happen. And then I texted you and Will and said, hey, this is what just happened. And then Malcolm, you were just like, that's the other half of the show.
Sure.
Which is what we always try to do, is bring the real life to the forefront. So what happens when someone passes on and they don't have any documents or plans as to what's supposed to happen with their assets or possessions? You work with people and clients every day on these kinds of things.
Right.
What's been your experience with, this topic generally?
So, well, first, I think it's important to point out that, to your point, the conversation that we're having or seeking to have is more so about talking to your parents, grandparents, whoever, about what the plan is without seeming like a gold digger. You don't want to give off the impression that you're counting their last days or you're trying to bump them off, right? But at the same time, it's really important to have those kind of conversations so that, if and when something happens, you're not scrambling around and making bad decisions.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so to your point, I have that conversation all the time with clients, probably a lot more than they want to have.
Sure.
Because I'm always, kind of pushing that thing along. Because to your point, it's foundational in this whole generational wealth conversation.
So why do people? What are some people's fears or concerns that people have when this topic comes up?
Well, I think I probably just touched on the biggest one, if not one of the two biggest ones, which is that I don't want them planning for
my demise.
Right. I don't want to feel like they're just waiting for me to get out the way, so that they can get their hands on my money. Which realistically, if that is your plan and that is what you're waiting on, or that's your kids or great
there's some jacked up kids,
then you don't need to have that conversation with them, right? But I guess we're assuming that everybody is on the up and up and actually just want to be educated. In that regard, it's important to carve out time to have that conversation and only that conversation.
Okay.
You know what I mean? The same way your grandma called you to formally have that conversation.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily something that, at least in the beginning, that you just on a Saturday afternoon you're riding from here to get some ice cream and it just comes up.
hey, Dad, what about when you die?
Right. And that's not going to solve it right there in that 15-minute drive anyway, right?
Absolutely.
So it's important to just open up the lines of communication by having a formal discussion where you both know what you're coming to talk about.
Absolutely.
And it's not like one person is blindsided or you know, that kind of thing.
And I think to some extent it has to be a certain amount of trust that's built up in having that conversation. So it definitely makes sense to like ease up to it, drop hints, get to it over time. Real quick, the other side of not planning this situation, you mentioned this earlier, just in our own like text messages. Prince, or the artist formerly known as, apparently there's still a year-long battle after his death over certain assets by members of his family and some other folks involved. What have you seen about that?
So Prince died with a multi-million-dollar estate. I don't remember what the numbers are anymore, but it's something astronomical, as you can imagine.
Right.
And no will.
No will.
So no written documentation, no plan for any of the stuff that he owns.
Right.
And, who knows how many properties, and then you get all his recordings and, all
which you
that
can't
kind of
listen
stuff.
to on streaming services.
Right. Because, it's tied up in legal battles.
Right.
So anyway. So, I mean, just think about that, right? Like not only what does that do to the value of his estate, but then what does that do to the actual money that would have been inherited?
Right.
So I'll give you a real life example. I actually witnessed this not too long ago. Somebody had an IRA, a pretty sizable IRA, passed away and left it all to their oldest child.
Right.
Didn't include any beneficiaries on the IRA, but in their will they said they wanted everything to go to their oldest child and let that oldest child figure out what to do with it among the other 3 siblings.
Okay. It was 3 total or 4 of them?
4 siblings.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One of them gets to make
messy.
the decisions for everybody.
Okay.
And that oldest child made the decision that I'm going to take all of the inheritance.
Okay.
And I'm going to distribute it amongst the 4 of us. But I'm going to liquidate the account the day that we received it. So what that did was, because they were all younger than 59 and a half, which is, retirement age by IRS standards, they're immediately paying a 10% penalty to
on
the IRS.
Early withdrawal.
Then they're immediately paying at their ordinary income tax bracket income on that money.
Right.
And not on your regular tax bracket like you would be if you make $80,000 a year, for example. You're in a 25% bracket.
Right.
You're paying taxes as your new tax bracket, because that inheritance is how much money you made that year.
Right.
So now they're paying in the 39.6% tax bracket because of how much they inherited, and the 10% penalty.
Right.
So literally,
you're decimating
50% is going out the door before you get your hands on it. The other 3 siblings weren't a fan of this decision. The other 3 siblings didn't want anything to do, wanted to roll it over into their own retirement accounts, keep the tax deferral, and so on and so on. Because the eldest child actually wanted / needed the cash in their hands that day, they chose to get an immediate distribution, cash in my hands, but 50% of it goes to the IRS immediately. That is the kind of stuff that can happen if you don't actually have some sort of plan in place on paper and verbal. And then, oh, by the way, those siblings will never talk to each other. Seriously,
so there's multiple layers to that.
It's levels.
It's very much levels to that. First of all, let's deal with the siblings first. How have you seen people deal with this conversation when there are multiple parties? Like, how many siblings do you have?
Just one.
Just one. So you and I both have. I have a sister. You have a sister. So it's like, that's cool. Like, you can figure it out between 2.
Yeah.
But when you get into 3, 4, and 5 people to split the decision making, like, what are your thoughts on like managing that situation?
I'm going to add another curveball in there.
Okay.
What if you have siblings, but half of them are from one marriage and the other are from another marriage?
Wait, what do you mean?
So your dad has you.
Okay.
Gets married again.
Oh, no.
Has another kid.
That's
now
real
you
messy.
got 2 totally separate moms, 2 totally separate ex-wives in the equation, and then the kids from both of those marriages.
Like half siblings.
Right.
Wow.
So I see that kind of stuff happen in clients of our office. So you get all kind of different.
We need a family therapist in this situation.
Well, so to that point though, it is a good idea if it makes sense in your own situation, right? To have a uninterested third party as part of the conversation.
Okay. Like a mediator?
Somebody like your financial advisor, your estate planning attorney, a family counselor, somebody who can kind of provide an outside opinion and kind of play referee and make sure everybody's being equitable in this thing. Because even then,
Right.
you know, you're dealing with emotions and you're dealing with the idea that now I'm sitting here talking about what happens when mom and dad die, and mom and dad are sitting here thinking about, I don't want to think about this. So it just,
It's also
it's not fun for anybody.
What's also hilarious about that reality that you just described is one where all the family dynamics are gonna come right back into play.
Mm-hmm.
So like whatever role you played as an 11-year-old is like you're back there at 32,
Right.
playing that role as the 11-year-old, fighting for your piece of the pie.
Right.
So it's interesting. So I think there has to be certainly if as much as possible, a sterilization
Yes.
of all those family issues in the context, which is extremely difficult to do within the context of having that conversation of what has to happen with the assets of the passing family member or future passing family member.
So let me qualify that / give a recommendation to whoever's watching / listening.
Mm-hmm.
I always, because that you just touched on something, the accounts themselves
Okay.
or the amounts themselves.
Uh-huh.
I always recommend when broaching the subject to just talk in percentages.
Okay.
You don't have to necessarily disclose to your kids
That's
who is going to get what as far as dollar figures
That's
are concerned.
true.
You just have to discuss, so like I said, it's easy.
Right.
Myself and my sister, it's only two of us. So
Right. 50-50.
assuming my parents love us equally, you say 50% you, 50% you, and then it's a done deal. But if say it's four of them,
Right.
you talk to your kids and you say 25% across the board,
Right.
we want you guys to sell the house and split it
Mm-hmm.
4 ways, or we want you to never sell the house and do X, or whatever the plan is. Talk broadly in percentages and not amounts, and then it makes it a lot easier for you to kind of give away
That's a
those
lot.
details without having to give too much detail and everybody's eyes gets wide. And
That's a lot easier to swallow. I wonder too, what about, this is an interesting question that also goes back to siblings, because we know that siblings always have siblings or even relatives, whether they be cousins or whatever, there's different personalities. And some personalities are more responsible than others.
Right.
So what about parents who have a choice between their responsible kid versus their, we'll call it less responsible kid, or the lesser responsible kids?
Okay.
And
I get where you're going.
how do you manage even that? Like, that Uncle Rooney is not the best when it comes to managing his own money.
Right.
Right? So why would I give Uncle Rooney 25% of this hard-earned money that I earned over my lifetime when I know Uncle Rooney is going to go spend it and do something silly with it? What as a parent, if you were advising a client, what's the conversation that happens with that?
so we have slated in our conversation to tap into a little bit the difference between wills and trusts.
Okay.
So the short answer is that can all be taken care of by a trust document, a lot of times not by a will.
Okay.
But so to that question, one piece of, again, just simple how to have the conversation advice, I would encourage and plead with folks to have that conversation. If you're going to make one person in charge of the whole group,
Sure, yeah.
at least let them know that before you die.
Don't let it be
Don't
a
drop
shock
that
at the
on
end.
them. They're digging through
Right.
documents and find that out later. And now all of a sudden they're like,
Jonathan got everything.
right, what did you say to
You gave Jonathan everything.
what did you say to mom and dad while I wasn't looking that made them decide that was the way to go? You know what I mean? Like, so you want them to have swallowed that bitter pill
Right.
before the day comes,
Right.
and not after, because you might not care because you'll be
Right.
gone,
Right.
but then your kids gotta
I don't
figure
know
their way
why
through that,
that's so funny to me.
I
that
see.
idea.
I see you have fights with imaginary
It's just-
siblings and
I
like
guess it's just comedic to me.
till it happens to you.
Yeah, that's the good point, Malcolm. Very good. So we want to remind people that you are listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. You can always catch all of our podcasts that we've done in the past. Just find us on iTunes. Just search Manage Your Damn Money. And you could also leave us a review on the Apple Podcast page. Just put us a review. Tell people how great we are, how much you love the podcast. If you have a
Review
question,
after you subscribe.
Review after you subscribe. Yes, absolutely. And then 2, if you have questions or thoughts or ideas or concerns, send them to info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. We want to hear from you. We're getting a lot of feedback from the show in different places. And if there's something that you want to have discussed on this show, just send us an email and we will bring it up pretty soon, possibly on the very next show. So, of course, we're talking to your parents about their plan for going on to glory. We've talked about like kind of wading through a lot of the I guess, family drama and family dynamics. We're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we're going to actually discuss some of the technical elements of dealing with estate planning,
Right.
and how you can do that in a way that makes sense, such that it is recognized legally by the people that needs to be recognized by. And we'll talk about how you can organize that and have that taken care of. And we'll also talk a little bit about what people have said on social media. So we're going to take a really quick music break. Here another cut from Mr. Beats by Beeman. This is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. We are back here on Manage Your Damn Money with myself, Ben, and my co-host, Malcolm. We're talking about how you can approach the conversation and the plan for when your parents go on to glory or they pass away. Also, elders or whoever your loved ones are. So just a couple of like key components that are technical in nature.
Right.
Let's say somebody. This is a really big like thing that people should know. That when somebody dies without estate planning, all their assets become susceptible to collection by like debtors and the state. Like kind of
well, not only debtors, like you got to pay your debts one way or another. Unfortunately, dead or alive, your creditors still want their money.
Right.
But when you die, without a will or a written plan,
Right.
it's called dying intestate.
Okay.
So dying intestate means that your assets then get put into what's called probate.
Okay.
And probate basically means that your local jurisdiction, your state or your local government
Right.
gets to have first dibs at your assets.
Right.
So
Oh,
they
wow.
get
Yeah.
to lock up the assets long enough to get a chance to determine the value of
And
those assets.
pick it apart.
And pick it apart so that they can determine then how much they should be receiving in tax income and all that kind of stuff. And that could take a year, 2 years, depending on the backlog
Right.
of where you live. So like, for example, we live in Maryland,
Right.
pretty big state,
Right.
a lot of residents.
Right.
It can take over a year for
Right.
them to get to you, depending on, where they are in the cycle and that sort of thing. So
Right.
that's one very simple reason for, having that
Right.
written plan in place.
And I think what's one of the couple of ways you mentioned having a will. Talk about the importance of a will. What are the primary tenets of a will or living will, and like how does it function?
Yeah, so the bare bones, things that need to go into a will are obviously the date that you wrote it and your signature. Okay. So that's going to be, presumably on the last page, date, signature. And it's also going to include names of things that you want to go to people, valuables, that kind of stuff. Okay. My computer is such a dear thing that I hold to my heart. I want it to go to somebody special. So I'm going to name that person and the name of this laptop, right? And then also accounts. So you have, bank accounts,
big.
investment accounts.
That's big.
You have property, real property. Maybe you have diamond jewelry, all that kind of stuff. Right. That needs to be listed out in presumably bullet point form of what it is, a description of it, where it currently is. Right. So whether it's a safe deposit box in Mississippi or it's, a safe deposit box in DC.
Or under your bed.
Right. those kind of details are important, and then also who the person or people are that you would like to receive that, and then also at what rate. So do you want them to get the whole thing? Do you want them to get half? Do you want them to get just $2 and then everything else go to your other, that kind of thing. Those are all the basic components that should be in there.
Now, is that something that someone needs help from a lawyer with, or is it something that you could simply do and maybe like go get it notarized? Like, what's the level of officialness that has to happen?
So it depends on how big your asset pool is.
Okay.
So if it's just you and a spouse, and you want to say, I have a niece, for example. So if I want to say I want to make sure that this mug specifically goes to my niece, I'll write that down in my will so that when I pass, my wife would know that specific thing.
Right.
But then when it gets more complicated and you have kids, and then you have multiple homes or multiple accounts and all that kind of stuff, maybe you don't want all that to go to one person. You don't want all that to go to your spouse. So I think the answer is, the older you get and the more complicated your financial life gets, the more you need to look for professionals to help you with this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Real quick, before we talk about what opening a trust is, we have a couple comments from social media. Feeling So Lady on Instagram says this particular topic is one of the cornerstones of the firm that she works for. It's interesting to see how unprepared some people are, particularly as it relates to transferring wealth and doing it in a fashion that protects the beneficiaries. Salute to you guys. So we did pick a good topic, apparently. Eileen says, too funny depiction. She was referring to the social media ad, yet so necessary and real. Tiffany on Facebook said something very curt and to the point. She said she would tell her mother, you can't take it with you, so you might as well figure it out with me.
That's a terrible closing argument.
Which is no cut cards with that. And then we
good luck to you, Tiffany.
Right, good luck, Tiffany, with that conversation starter. And then we had someone else who mentioned actually having had this conversation because of their parent having an illness, and that having been a discussion that they've already talked about. So definitely something that kind of is on people's minds. Now, will is like the first layer. You can get some help with it. Maybe, like I said, maybe get it notarized, just kind of increase the level of officialness, put it somewhere safe where people know where it is or can be told where it is after the fact. What about, it's interesting because I'll start with a real quick story. A friend of mine is an only child, and he told me 2 or 3 years ago, he was like, yeah, I decided or figured out I'm going to open a trust for my parents. So that way that when they die, all the things that they own or all the assets they have will be funneled into that quote unquote trust, such that he can then deal with it all from the trust. What is opening a trust, and how do you do it real quick?
Well, first off, I hope he had his parents'
Yeah. It was totally. It was totally consensual.
Because the way you made it sound is like he just said, "I'm going to take their social, open this account, and then on the day they die, I'm gonna handle my business."
I think it was a little more legit.
Okay, I hope there was a little bit more conversation that went on than that.
Yes,
but I mean, essentially, so opening a trust. When you say that, it sounds kind of the same as opening a bank account or opening a Twitter account, which is not. Okay. A trust is actually just a formalized legal document that is drafted by some professional, usually an estate attorney, that has language in it that's very specific and very strict to what you want to have happen to your assets.
Okay.
That's about as simple as I can, try and make it.
Right.
But it's not something that you just get online, enter your social date of birth, and it opens up.
Here's the trust.
Right.
Talk about the value of the trust really quickly as it pertains to protecting your assets from getting, what was that word you used?
Probated.
Probated.
Yeah.
How does a trust protect against that?
So essentially, a trust is like the next iteration of the will. Okay. So bare bones, bottom line, gotta have a will. Okay. Right. But if you decide to go a little further, because a will can actually be contested in court. Okay. And in some cases, it can be overturned if you can make a case that mom or dad was sick when they wrote it, or not in their right mind, or something like that. It can be contested. Right. But a trust is a little bit different and goes further beyond, because it gets filed with the state that you live in, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And it allows for more specific language. So, for example, where we were talking about, you have that potential beneficiary who you know is going to spend all that money.
Right.
That's what we call a spendthrift beneficiary. So
Okay.
that person is going to blow through all that cash in 6 days.
Okay.
And actually, real quick, the statistic on it is that usually the second generation takes less than 18 months to spend the inheritance from the day that it gets in their hands.
Whew.
So you
quick.
do that math, right?
Right.
Like you spend a 40-year career building up these retirement assets, and it takes your kids
Hit these
less
fools.
than 18 months to blow through it.
That's hilarious.
The math on that is terrible.
It's not hilarious, but it's funny.
But yeah, so with a trust, it allows you to put in details like the beneficiary of this asset can only access 5% of that amount for every single year for the rest of their
Absolutely.
life until the money is gone or
Absolutely.
whatever. Whereas a will, you kind of just say this person's going to get it, and that's what it is.
Right. So having a will is the first layer, opening a trust is the second. Real quick, we only have like 2 minutes left in this episode. We want to real quick run through some ways to kind of edge up to the conversation
Sure.
with elders without appearing money hungry. First, you want to edge up to the conversation over time. Don't lead with money or assets, but wanting to make sure this area of space is taken care of. So I think that's a really big deal in appearing genuine.
Sure.
Start the conversation early with family members and siblings and things such that no one feels like anyone's trying to get the better of the other.
Right.
Obviously, you can drop hints or explore more light topics like burial preferences. My dad once told me
Good luck.
casually, he said which he now disputes, but he told me he would, he said he wanted to be cremated.
Okay.
And he wanted me to spread his ashes along the California coast.
Okay.
He told me that, and then I asked him again, and it kind of changed. So I don't know. Dad, you got to tell me again. Also, be sensitive, listen, and absorb what your elders have to say. Make sure you're absorbing their concerns or their desires, and reassure your desire to carry out their will as they want. Include other parties, siblings, parents, aunts, uncles. And then finally, encourage elders to leave power to the more responsible party. I think that was my opining there. I think it's really important to pick the most responsible person who's going to do the best. That's kind of not a cool conversation to have. It's not a comfortable reality, but some people are more responsible than others. So that's the end of this show.
Or this show will be available on iTunes and online if you want to watch it and listen to it again. Use this as a conversation starter.
There you go. It's right here. We did it for you. We did the hard work. So you could put it on just casually and be like, so, Mom, what do you think?
Easy enough.
There you go. We want to remind you that you've been listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. You can always catch us on iTunes or the Apple Podcast platform. Just search Manage Your Damn Money. Subscribe and leave us a review. You can also find us on our website at manageyourdamnmoney.com and on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. Where can people find you on social media, Malcolm?
At Malcolm on Money.
Of course, you can always find myself and the full Manage Your Damn Money platform at MYDM1, both on Twitter and Instagram. Another great show, Malcolm. We did an excellent job, I think.
I thought that went pretty well.
It was fun. So next time we'll talk about something a little bit more fun than death. We'll see you next time on Manage Your Damn Money.
Peace.
Peace.